I'd say I consider myself an artist, but definitely first and foremost a designer, but not specifically a fashion designer. My beginning in fashion, I was working as a hardware designer and a design assistant for a company, and we would get this glorious 2 weeks before every new season to go and do research, and I would go straight to the engineering section. I would go to the chemistry section. I would look at the rivets on an airplane and how that could relate to the top stitching on a coat. I would look outside of the influence of clothing to then be inspired to make pieces. As I approach making any piece, I'm looking at texture, color, and silhouette as the three most important things that inspire me to make the piece, and then also what I want the final product to look like. And the inspiration for the pieces can come from any direction, and recently I've been very inspired by looking at the absolute macro vision versus micro vision. If you look at a mountain, what do you see silhouette and texture-wise? If you look at a tiny grouping of stitches, what are you looking at? How does it actually resemble topography in the smallest way? I have a huge collection of lace doilies and handkerchiefs. I mean, just the little bit of crocheting at the edge or a little bit of lace that's inset. I find it fascinating in that there's a little world within each of those. The time spent just looking within it, it has so much detail. It's very important to me to allow space to dream within looking even just at the smallest tiny section of the underside of a sleeve or, the inside of a pleat. I want there to be something there that engages. My solo work that I've been doing for the last 2.5, 3 years is called The Dowsing. I started it as a calling card. So I thought, how can I deliver this? And I dreamt in my mind of these sculptures that were just shapes. So I was like, well, let's just make them into sculptures. This will make a lot of sense in that it'll be a quick and easy way to get the ideas out there that are sort of ruminating in my mind, and then I'll put them out there on armatures, and it'll be textile sculptures that could either be taken as clothing, they could be taken as sculpture. It's just really about the color and the silhouette. It's interesting to think of putting my pieces into a performative aspect, because as people come and see the show and they have this galvanizing moment of this is what happened when I saw The Dowsing, I felt like this. The clothes themselves are changed, I believe, and then when they go into a museum or into a setting where they're on an armature and they're allowed to be examined up close in a much different setting, it's so intimate, and I believe that also it builds a different story around the garment versus just, it was made by someone who never knew where it was going to go and it got sold. It's about making a piece that is documented in time as having changed via this experience. When I look to my aesthetic and where it comes from, I am very heavily influenced by plain dressing techniques of the Amish. I really look towards plain fabrics. I often work in a very light color palette. For this last dowsing, I got into a new process I hadn't been that familiar with before, but I started rusting fabric to create, over even a couple days, just a completely different landscape within the fabric, and it was very successful. As I started doing a little bit of that work, I also realized I was ignoring a huge part of the intention behind the work, and that was that I'm making the work to be the beginning conversation discussing my vision of how I saw the fashion industry needing to go, or where I've seen it going and wanting it to change to a different direction, discussing the longevity of product, the artistry of fashion design, trying hard to bring quality and meaning back into production. In Seattle, you have a little bit more space and time to look within to find the answers for your creativity. As we stay indoors more and we have more time to listen to our own answers that come out about how we're supposed to make something or why we're making something, I look to the landscape and I just think, we can be this quiet because the landscape is this big. It's not that we're like sitting around dreaming, looking at trees, but we definitely have a little more space to think and to dream.